You're listening to episode number 28 of the REIA Masterclass podcast. What's going on, everybody? It's Brian Trippe. I'm right here in beautiful Birmingham, Alabama. I'm so glad you decided to join us today. We've got a great guest in our little studio that we've created here. We're going to get to that in just a second, but I want to make sure you guys understand and know everything we got going. Our next REIA meeting is going to be on July 13th. We're always the second Thursday night of every month. July 13th, Mr. Joe Turney is going to come and speak to us about recycling money. He has built an entire rental portfolio, and he's done fix and flips just by being able to recycle the same cash over and over and over again. He's going to show you his business model, exactly how he did that. It's very powerful. So make sure you come and check that out. 6 p.m. at the Embassy Suites Hotel. Even if you're listening to this and you're not in Birmingham, if you're driving through Birmingham, you're coming through Birmingham, come check us out. First-time guests can attend free always. We've got some great REIA meetings as well coming up in August. Sean McCloskey's coming to speak to us from St. Louis. In September, I'm a huge believer in sales training because I think we are in sales. If you're a real estate investor, you're in sales. Ryan Stewart is a sales trainer. He's going to come and speak to us, not selling us anything, coming to speak to us and teach us how to be salespeople. And then we've got a great group in October. We're going to have a property management roundtable. All Birmingham area people who are managing property we're going to have about 3 or 4 people on stage. I'm just going to kind of host it. I'm going to kind of be the little MC, and we're going to just ask them questions and see how they effectively manage property here in Birmingham. It's going to be great. And then make sure you come to our next meeting on July 13th. I'm going to make a special announcement. We've just booked an incredible speaker for November, and I'm going to announce that on July 13th. So make sure you come on out. Please check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/REIA. Like our page, rate us and review us. The Daily REIA Show, I apologize. I've kind of been lacking on the Daily REIA Show a little bit, but we are going to start pumping those out big time here shortly. And one last thing I do want to mention, I'm going to be in Huntsville speaking on July 8th. So that's a Saturday morning at 9 a.m. I'm going to be in Huntsville. For you Huntsville people, make sure you come on out. I'm going to be out there speaking on July 8th at the Keller Williams in Huntsville on social media and marketing and how to find motivated sellers through using the power of social media. So definitely check that out. So without further ado, I want to talk to our guest. Mr. Walter Baker is here in the studio. How's it going, Walter?
Great. Got a nice rainy day. What better day to talk about real estate?
It's a beautiful rainy day outside in Birmingham, Alabama. Walter and I have been going back and forth through email and through phone and through text. And for how long? 3 months, 4 months? Been trying so hard. Our schedules just haven't been able to mesh. Finally, today, this rainy day, we've been able to get together. And Walter, you know what's really interesting? I think we've had like 3 of your past coaching students on here: Jason Holland, Cindy Talbert, and I'm drawing a blank.
Probably Dale.
No, Dale refuses to come on. I'm probably gonna have to cut this out because he doesn't even want me to mention his name.
Paul Latham.
Paul Latham. So your name has been dropped in this podcast at least 3 or 4 times. So it's awesome to finally get you here and learn from the master.
Thank you.
So for the people that don't know who you are, the few that are out there in Birmingham that don't know who you are, give us just a little bit of background. Who are you? How did you get into real estate?
Well, I'm a normal guy. I live south of town in an unincorporated area because I hate taxes. And I guess I got into real estate like so many people do. Sleepless night, saw a info commercial, and they were coming to town to do a free talk. And my wife and I went and got intrigued. Didn't sign up, but studied it, looked into it, investigated it, and ended up going to a seminar in Atlanta, about 2.5 hours east of us. And decided that we were going to give it a try. That's kind of how it all started.
Who was it, if you don't mind me asking? Like, what was the seminar that you?
Well, the original seminar was Ron LeGrand.
Okay.
He was not my first choice, but he was convenient. We actually, the people that had the original talk, I investigated them. I wasn't interested in them at all based on what I read. The guy I really wanted to go see was out in Phoenix, but he only did one seminar a year, and it had taken place about a month prior. So LeGrand was about my third choice, but we went over there, and it was very good.
Yeah,
very good.
Yeah, awesome.
Got us started.
Yeah, and that's how I got started. Most of you guys know my story. I started with Rich Dad Education. I didn't know anything about real estate at all, like zero. And I went to they tell you it's a free real estate training, but it's not.
Well, it's designed to get money out of your pocket.
It's designed to get money out of your pocket. But at the end of the day, it's really hard to talk bad about it. And I'm sure you feel the same way because you wouldn't even be in real estate without it.
That's right.
So you told me just a second ago, kind of when we were offline, that your real estate career really started when you became what I call like an accidental landlord. You said you couldn't sell a house. Right. And that's kind of how you started. Kind of, if you don't mind, tell us that story a little bit.
Well, I was living in Houston, Texas, and that's where I met my wife. That's where we got married. We owned a house. We bought it when we thought, well, I moved to Houston during the oil boom of I guess it was the early 80s. And we bought a house. Well, then we went through the bust. And so we bought a house when we thought it was at its low point, but we were wrong. It went lower.
Wow.
Well, I got at that point I was in corporate America. I got a job that I had been trying to get for quite a while, and they moved me out of Houston. Well, I had a house I couldn't sell. It was worth less than I had paid for it. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this have experienced that before. And so I had to rent it out, and I became a long-distance landlord and learned how not to do real estate, quite frankly. I mean, I lost my shirt.
Wow.
Yeah, I did everything wrong, picked the wrong tenant.
Wow.
It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare.
So usually something like that, having that kind of nightmare would deter people from getting back into it. I know you kind of went to a seminar, but what was it that made you not get just completely turned off by real estate?
Well, even before that had happened, I had always read about so many successful people. If they didn't make their money in real estate, they had real estate after they made their money. They invested in real estate. That's how they diversified their portfolios. In a lot of cases, that's how they reduced their tax impact on their lives. And so I was always interested in real estate. I had read books about it, never attended seminars or took it super seriously. But it had been in the back of my mind really from the time I had gotten out of school.
Yeah.
So it didn't completely turn me off, and I recognized that it was a difficult situation. I didn't have a proper education. I had done some other things in the stock market where I started investigating into education and recognized how much was available out there in all endeavors. So I just kind of reasoned in my mind that if I educated myself, I could do better, at least. So I wasn't totally turned off about the idea. And ultimately, it did work out. We got rid of the house. And it was a little bit painful, but, it was a seminar in itself.
Sure.
And I remember a guru saying that one time, you're going to go to a seminar one way or the other.
That's right.
You're either going to pay for somebody to teach you the recipe, or you're going to go through the seminar of hard knocks.
And hopefully not both.
That's right.
Hopefully just one or the other. Yeah, no, absolutely right. So here we are today in 2017. Walter, you've done a lot of stuff with real estate. You're doing a ton of different things even today. You went full-time, and I think you said maybe 2002. Is that what you told me?
Yeah.
So you've been full-time for almost 15 years, about 15 years. What have you done from 2002 until now to make it to where you've had success in real estate? Like, what's kind of been your bread and butter?
Well, I like to tell people that we've gone through the typical evolution of an investor. In the beginning, I wanted to flip houses for cash any way I could, whether it be wholesales or buying a house, fixing it up, and retailing it, but replace my corporate income, basically. So we did that, frankly, by the end of about the end of the 7th month doing this full time. And by the way, my wife is a team member. I mean, we were in this together all the way, and both of us were working full time.
So you replaced your income in 7 months?
About the end of the 7th month, we hit a big deal that my wife had actually been working on. It was a big short sale. And in the next month following that, a bunch of deals came in. So by the end of the 7th month, we had more than made up for what I'd ever made in corporate America. So the first couple of 3 years, we were flipping houses for cash and paying a big tax burden, paying ordinary income tax rates and whatnot. But I noticed that I never met a wealthy flipper. I met guys that had good lifestyles, but if you ask them about, well, if you got hurt next week, what happens? And it wasn't a pretty picture. But I met a lot of really well-to-do buy and hold guys. A lot of landlords seemed to have it made, and they seemed a lot more casual, in their walk, and they were just like, wow, life is good. When the flippers were like, jazzed up on coffee or some kind of caffeine so they could keep going the next day. So it was kind of a natural evolution. I started. I got big time educated for one thing, and that's once we went to the first seminar, the next thing I know, I had gone to 20 seminars.
Wow!
And I've always enjoyed learning, so for there to be a new technique or a new way to buy or sell a house or something like that, I was always interested in it.
Yeah.
So we were trying a little bit of everything. So I dabbled in some rental houses. I interviewed all kinds of landlords by interviewing, taking them to lunch and just picking their brains, and it seemed to be that the money, the guys that were making the big money were buying houses in areas where I would not necessarily want to live.
Yeah.
And that was a real eye-opener for me. I was envisioning doing real estate in my own neighborhood, but one of the things that I got indoctrinated with was the money's where you don't want to live. It's in the lower end, quite frankly. And so I bought a couple of little low-end rental houses, and because we had cash reserves. So I bought them, and I'm like, this check would come in every month. And I'm like, well, it's not a huge check, but I could see where this could add up into a really nice lifestyle.
Right.
So that's kind of how we went over a 15-year period. Now, I've even turned some houses that I ordinarily would have retailed into rentals.
Retail as in flipped.
Correct.
Yeah.
They're a little larger than I like for a rental.
Right.
A little more to them, and therefore a little more to fix up in between tenants and things of that nature. But I've come to where I like the monthly income.
Yeah.
If I get a big lump of cash, somehow I'm able to spend that very quickly.
I know.
And, I'm going to buy a new Wave Runner or something with that cash. But if I invested in a house, then I've got that money coming in every month from that house. And it's like a raise every time you buy a house. So it's great.
So your business model today is all about the passive income, the making sure you have that flow of income coming in that's predictable.
I like the passive income, but I still do flips too. A lot of times, last year I did just two retails.
Wow.
We used to do 6 or 8 in any given year. So I've never been like a big volume guy, 20, 30 houses in a year or something like that. But we made great money. I never did deals where I was only making like $15,000 or $20,000. It was always pretty good paychecks.
Wow.
On the retails. But we did 2 last year, and the 2 that we did, the reason that I didn't turn them into rentals, it varies, but big houses, one of them on 3 acres, like multiple garages, and just too much to rent out, basically. Too much for a tenant to take care of. They won't take care of it, for that matter.
Right.
And it was just a good opportunity to make a big old paycheck. Yeah. So if I want to buy a new car or a new boat, I have a lake house. So if I want a new boat or something like that, I'm going to be looking for a retail. Just go out, make that money, pay cash for whatever it is I want. But more than likely, if I don't have something I want, and more I just don't need anything anymore. I just take that money from a retail and buy a rental house free and clear.
Yeah.
So, in fact, that's really how we built up our portfolio for the most part, is make money from a retail and buy a rental house free and clear, turn it into monthly income.
So if you guys have been around REIA for any period of time, my business model is very similar to what Walter just said, except I wholesale instead. I don't do a lot of fix and flips. It's my personal preference. I just don't like them. I like to wholesale and take that revenue and go buy a rental. And that's been my business model. And that's what we teach. We teach that I agree with what Walter said earlier. There are very few people out there that are like only fix and flip. That's all they do. Very few people that can pull that off. And same thing with wholesaling. Very few people can only wholesale. But if you start with nothing or start with very little, or maybe you want to replace your corporate income or whatever it is, you need to wholesale or flip, get money, buy passive income. The key is passive income, right?
Well, it is
what you found.
It is for us.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people that would rather get the big checks.
Yeah.
And just spend, have a lavish lifestyle. But I'm not that way.
Right. Talk to kind of the point to where, some people argue that, well, it's not really that passive. There's always something that's going to happen. There's always a maintenance issue. There's always, this could happen, bad tenants, all sorts of things. Kind of talk to that point and maybe even defend the buying rentals a little bit.
Well,
which sounds ludicrous. You shouldn't have to defend that, but
it's a business. And I think if it's your personal house that you've lived in for maybe 10 years, you've got all these memories, raising kids and whatnot, and you rent that sucker out, you're probably in for an emotional roller coaster. Mm-hmm. But when you just buy a little house that, you wouldn't ever think about living in, or you might have lived in it in college, but, now it's a little bit beneath you, so to speak.
Right.
You have no emotional tie to it anyway. But you are going to have problems with tenants. You're going to have problems with them tearing up your house and it looking like a wreck when you get it back once they move out and stuff like that. If that bothers you, this might not be the business for you. It's just business to me. Now, we use property managers. Mm-hmm. You and I have talked about that a little bit. Mm-hmm. I probably would have a hard time if I managed. I have a lot of houses now, so if I were managing them myself, I really don't think my life would be my own. I'd be answering the phone all the time or returning phone calls.
Yep.
So to me, it's worth, I pay 8% of the gross rent to my property managers. And gosh, they're worth that and more to me.
Yeah.
And they're a great resource for me in other ways too, because as long as I've been doing this business, Birmingham is about, greater Birmingham's probably 1 million folks as far as folks that, depend on Birmingham for their living. So with 1 million folks, there's still areas. Every now and then I get a lead and I'm like, I don't know this area that well. I don't know if it rents, and if it does rent, what it rents for, mm-hmm. or anything else. Well, the property managers, most of those guys have anywhere from 300 to 700 houses. Chances are good they've got 1 or 2 houses in that neighborhood. So they're a great resource. Call them.
Yeah.
Hey, what's this neighborhood like? I was going to close on a house this week, and a property manager says, "Oh, hey, I've managed that house before. You don't want that."
That exact house.
Yeah. So I backed out of the deal.
Wow.
And just said, they could rent it, but it was tough to rent, and they never could hold on to a tenant for more than a year, for more than the lease period. Well, that's not a way to make money in rental houses. Right. Money comes from long-term tenants.
Yeah, for sure. So just to kind of follow up with that point, the people that say I don't want rentals, and there are a few out there. I don't want rentals because the maintenance and the bad tenants and getting your house back with it all tore up, it's not emotional, but they say it offsets the rent, and so it's a wash. And to that you say,
well, I mean, I've pretty much proven it's not. I mean,
me too. I'm just trying to.
I know. Okay. I'm an engineer with a math minor, so I'm a real believer in arithmetic. I've done the arithmetic over the years, and I'm telling you, there's money in it.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, there's big money in it.
Yeah.
Then the tax advantages of it are phenomenal. If an investor, just to use a round number, a guy in corporate America is making $100,000 versus an investor that has passive income from rentals that makes $100,000 in net passive income. The guy making $100,000 as an investor is going to keep a whole lot more of his money than the guy working in corporate America. That's a fact. That is a statistical fact. You can't dispute it. So if you're scared of tenants, and frankly I am too. If you're scared,
that's why I use
tenants,
property managers.
You get a property manager and let them pick the tenant. And I mean, it's just not that hard. Now you still need to have a relationship with that property manager. And I always tell people you got to manage the manager. That's your manager.
No question.
You gotta look over that statement every month and question it, and just be reasonable. And they make mistakes. You're one of many houses that they have, one of many landlords. So you got to understand that, and just it's a relationship thing. Everything's a people business. Right?
No question. Real estate totally is. Walter, give us a sense, give the listeners, maybe some new people out there listening, a sense of, because you're talking about, you said the phrase lower income. What are some areas in Birmingham where if I'm getting started, or maybe I'm a new investor to Birmingham, where should I go get that rental property that's going to get that kind of cash flow to where I'm going to make that kind of money?
Well, frankly, the lower you go, the more you make as far as net.
But
I don't like to be in neighborhoods where bullets are flying around all the time. Now, an occasional bullet's okay.
Okay. So how low is, because there is too low. So how low of income will you go? What type of area? What's kind of the worst part of area in Birmingham that you would actually go and hold a house?
Well, I have several in Inslee. Now, Inslee is a large area. But there are pockets of Inslee where I would not think of buying a house. And there are other pockets where I own a few. So, that's pretty low end. Now, I've got one that's in an area where I normally would not invest. But a guy out of New York State sold it to me for $6,500, I think. And the only thing I put into that house is new shingles on the roof. That cost me another $3,000. So I got less than $10,000 in this house. It was rent ready when I got it. The only problem was the weeds were waist high in the yard.
Right.
So we cleaned up the yard, handed it over to a property manager. It's been rented ever since for like $650 a month from a $6,500 investment. It seemed like I calculated one time that's like a 65% return on your dollar.
Yeah.
But that's still a house that I normally would not buy. I normally want to be all in areas where you can find a deal and be all in for somewhere around $30,000, $35,000, maybe $40,000. That's kind of my target, if you will.
So Inslee, and you don't have to. Some people are kind of close to the vest. Certain areas that I don't want you to say anything you don't want to say, but Inslee is kind of the lower end of the spectrum for you.
I think so.
No, West End.
Well, now I've actually retailed the house in West End.
Okay.
I don't have anything against West End.
No,
I don't,
and I don't either.
And I know there are some good areas in West End.
Yeah, there are.
I just don't. I haven't. None of them have come to me.
Gotcha.
I have some houses in Southeast Lake. There's some areas in Southeast Lake that I don't care for. And I for instance, I try to stay. Is it north? I get my directions. I think north of a Port of Madrid.
Yes.
I don't like to go south of a Port of Madrid.
No, nobody does.
I don't care for Inglenook. I don't care for most of Woodlawn. But there are some pockets in Woodlawn that I would consider.
Interesting. So I guess what I hear you saying is, obviously do your due diligence, but it's kind of street to street. You just need to pay attention to the streets. There are a lot of great pockets in any of these areas. I tell
you, Brian, knowing your market is one of the keys. Everybody's looking for the magic pill. It's a combination of a lot of little things that you have to know. There's no one thing that's going to make you successful. So it's a lot of little things, but knowing that market is so important. That's the reason that you need to network. Go to the REIA meetings in your area and get to know other investors, because you can't possibly know every pocket of every neighborhood in greater Birmingham.
Impossible.
And we're not anything compared to if somebody's listening to this from Atlanta or Nashville or something like that.
What would you do, or what would you recommend to someone who's newer to get to know the market? You mentioned networking, but what else can people do to get to know their market?
Well, put a lot of miles on your vehicle. I mean, you just got to drive the streets.
Yeah.
And if you're wise, you've gotten to know some other investors from meetings. And if you've got a rental house or two, maybe you've got a property manager. Those are great resources. I'm telling you, property managers know markets.
Yeah.
They have to.
Right.
But you just call these guys that you've hopefully had breakfast with or lunch with or whatever. And what do you know about this? And a lot of times they don't know anything about it, but they know Joe Smith that does. And they'll hook you up to them. I know Joe has one over there. So you get connected with them, and that's just the best way to get to know those areas. I'm not a real believer in studying demographics, because demographics will scare you away from an area where there's a lot of money to be made.
That's right.
In those areas.
That's right. So I want to talk about, we're still talking about rentals, but I want to shift just a little bit and get because this is just like the age-old argument, and I want to get your take on it. You are a strong believer in paying cash. You don't really like the leverage model as much.
Well, I don't have a job. I'm not lendable.
Okay.
I can't go to a bank.
Well, you've got it. You can prove your income.
I could now, but early on I couldn't. Like the first 3 to 4 years, we were, in fact, the second year in the business, I worked with my accountant to greatly limit our income, because I was moving all of our traditional IRA to a Roth, because I had learned a little bit about Roth IRAs and the power of them. And all of that's come around to where now I'm using the Roth because I'm of the age to where I can. And that's been a great thing.
You are.
Yeah.
That's okay. You don't have to. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm that old.
That's okay. But so just kind of you only initially started paying cash for houses. Obviously you had it because you were making the money from the flips. But you're a bigger believer in that model too, aren't you? Or no?
Well, the real money in rentals is getting them paid off.
Okay.
There's no doubt about that.
Okay.
That's when you really start appreciating what that passive income can do for you. But I'm not like who's the financial guy? Dave something.
Ramsey.
I'm not like anti-leverage. I think leverage is a good thing. I think there's good leverage, there's good debt, and there's bad debt.
Explain that.
Well, and he went bankrupt, in real estate. He had the old Robert Allen model, nothing down. Everything was leveraged highly, and then he'd pull money out of those. Well, that's a formula for disaster. There's no doubt about it. But if you're leveraged at the right level to where your tenant is paying down that house for you, that's good debt. That's great debt. Now, you can't appreciate it now, but especially if you're a young person, that's going to pay off for you in a very serious way in your future. My favorite way, Brian, to buy a house to this day, even if it's a rental, and especially if it's a rental, is with seller financing. And no interest, principal only. Hey, can I just pay you $400 a month? And the typical house, the typical rental house that I have rents for $750 to $795. Well, the net on that's about $500 a month.
The net on it is?
The net.
That's because they're completely paid for. That's with no debt.
With no leverage.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry. That's true. So you got taxes, insurance, and maintenance, and management. So that's usually going to run 30 to 40%, depending on really insurance and taxes. I protest taxes every year at the equalization office. There you go.
I just held up my tax cards. I got 2 I got to protest.
And so, and frankly, most of my rentals, I have liability insurance only, because every year and a half, with the amount of rentals that I have, I can afford to buy another house with my savings.
That's interesting.
So if one burned to the ground or blew away from a tornado, as long as it doesn't happen more than every 2 years, I'm in good shape. I'm money ahead.
Yeah.
That's something I learned from another investor, by the way, just taking him to lunch. And I'm like, bells go off in my head, because I was up around 30 rentals at the time. And that's right about 25 or 30 rentals is when you can start seeing that this would work out good for you too. But anyway, I get off on tangents.
No, guys, I really, really hope you guys are paying attention. Walter's like, he just leaned up in his chair. He's just getting going. Like, Walter's just a wealth of knowledge in Birmingham. And